Usually that indicates that we've gone live. So I think we still have, checking the clock out here. We have 2 minutes. So hi everybody, I'm Troy Klein, and I just wanted to let you know we're setting up the show. I have Margaret and Deborah here on board, and I'm getting all the settings correct, and there's always a little glitchy thing, but it looks like everything's working out really nicely. And I know the show is going to start here actually in just about 2 minutes. So it looks like we can hear Margaret really well. Got a good picture coming in, Margaret. It looks good.
Hey, y'all.
And Deborah will be back in just a little bit. And then Margaret will introduce her and get the show going. And as she does that, then what I'm going to do, Margaret, is I'll step back. I'll be silent and just kind of watch the channel for any questions and comments that people have. Kind of help you out with that. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, Troy. Thanks.
I should be playing, I should have some music in the background, like some mystical, fun music. That would be, that'd be really cool. We should do that. Okay, I think we're just about there.
I'm trying to hit this.
All right. See if I can get it to pop up for me here and play the whole thing for me. That's weird. All right, just about 1 more minute. And have to do it off my phone. Okay. Everybody just about ready? I think we'll check the page and see. We probably have some people already jumping online right now. For some reason, the page, your ghost tracking site isn't coming up on my iPad. So
Well, you better get it there.
right. I should check and see which
I see
Wi-Fi
3
I got
people. All right, so I'm
All
just
right.
going to get started with it.
All right,
And
it's all yours.
so, hey, y'all, this is Margaret, Inspired Ghost Tracking. Our guest speaker tonight is Debra Diamond. So I am just going to turn it over to her and let her talk to you about her book and near death, right, Deborah?
Yeah, near-death experiences. So can everyone hear me okay? Yes?
Sure can.
Yeah. So, well, let me tell you a little bit my background. My name's Debra Diamond, and I am an author, and I do a lot of speaking and teaching. I'm also a psychic medium. And they're all the things that I do work together. They're all interrelated. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and how I came to do this work. I was actually a money manager for many years. I was in the investment business. And when I was in the investment business, I always kind of knew things, but I didn't know how I knew them, how I knew these things. I'd get a big stack of mail like this, 3 times a day. We were all expected to read all these reports, research reports and annual reports, prospectuses, all sorts of things, keep up on things. And for me, I was able to just pick up, a piece of paper, a prospectus, a report, and I would know about the company or the product or the industry. I didn't know how I knew this, but I did. And I had that experience throughout my investment career. Nobody explained to me that this was a unique ability that I had. Certainly the word psychic doesn't come up in the investment business. It's really just a dollars and cents business. So I didn't know that it was anything else. But my boss used to say to me, Deborah, you have really good instincts. So I thought, oh, that must be the answer, good instincts. And I kind of left it at that. It wasn't until 2007, 2008, I decided to take an intuition development class in New York, because I thought, I have pretty good intuition. It would be fun to tune it up. So I went up to New York for the weekend to this class. There were about 25 people in the class, and men and women. I didn't know any of them. And we started off Saturday morning doing a number of exercises, psychic development, intuition development type exercises. And I was getting everything. And I couldn't figure out how that was possible, but I wasn't too concerned about it because it was a very low key event. And anyway, we took a break. And when we came back, the teacher said, now we're going to do a seance. Okay, so I did not want to do a seance. I did not come to this class to do a seance. I was there just to learn intuition development. And, I looked at the schedule for the day and it didn't say anything about a seance. And I thought, I don't really want to do this. But the thing is, it was Saturday morning and the class went on through Sunday afternoon. And I thought, well, I guess I'll just do this one exercise and then we'll go on to something else. And nothing's going to happen anyway. So the teacher said, let me put you in a meditative state. We'll all meditate, and then I'll take you out of the meditation. And if you hear anything or see anyone, you let me know. And I thought, well, that doesn't pertain to me. I'm not going to see anybody. So we all meditated. And then the teacher took us out of the meditation and said, does anyone see anything? Anyone see anyone? And we looked around the room. We all looked at each other and I raised my hand and the teacher said, yes, Deborah, what do you see? And I said, I see about 50 people. These were people who had passed. I guess in your vernacular, you would call them ghosts, but in my space, they're just people who've passed. And I was seeing them. They were relatives of mine. They were friends and relatives of the other people in the class. And then there were like some random people kind of walking through the room, like 42nd Street showgirls were prancing through the room. And this did take place in New York. So the teacher said, if you see anyone, she said, you see anyone in the corner of the room? She said, a lot of times, if someone's sitting in that corner, someone who's passed will be over, in the corner of the room near the ceiling. So I said, yes, I do see someone in the far right corner. And she asked me to describe him. And I said, well, he had black hair, handlebar mustache, big white teeth. He sort of looked like Tony Orlando. And as I described him, the woman sitting in that far right corner said, I know who that is. That's my fiance. He died 2 years ago. So this woman asked me, she said, if I show you pictures of him on my cell phone during the break, will you be able to identify him? And I said, sure, because it's just like looking at you guys. Of course I could identify you. I see you so clearly. So during the break, she came over and she flipped through her phone and I said, there, that's him. I pointed to a picture. I said, there, that's him. And she said, that's my fiance. Now, he had died 2 years before and she believed in, this whole other world, that you would be able to connect with this afterlife, and was very disappointed because it had been 2 years and she hadn't heard anything from him. There'd been no connection. So she was very happy that I was able to make this connection for her. So she hugged me and she thanked me. Now, remember, I come from Wall Street. There are no hugs on Wall Street. Nobody hugs you for anything. And there are no thank yous either. So I was overwhelmed by the situation. I was overwhelmed by her reaction. I really didn't know what to make of any of this. I continued in the class the rest of the weekend. And and lots of things were happening the rest of the weekend because now I had sort of opened a portal and lots of things were happening. I drove back to Baltimore Sunday night, and on my way home, I called one of my sons. I have 3 sons, but one is very left brain. He's very linear. He's a linear thinker. And I called him and I told him what happened. And he listened to me. And when I was all done, he said, well, that makes sense. We're just energy and the energy has to go somewhere. So in other words, his explanation was, sort of a scientific, pseudo-scientific spiritual explanation, cross between science and spirituality, which was something that I could understand. So this may be different than, how you all think about things, but this was, what he told me. And I could understand that, that everything is energy. Everything is energy. We are energy. The wall behind me has energy. Every living thing has energy. And when we die, when we pass, that energy continues. The physical body doesn't continue, but the energy continues. So anyway, he said that, and I I understood that, gave me a context for things, but I still didn't talk about what happened to me because people don't talk about these kinds of things. It's not the kind of thing where you go to work on a Monday morning and somebody says, "What'd you do this weekend?" "I went to the movies." And you say, "Oh, I saw 50 dead people," so in the afterlife. So it's not something that anybody discusses because they're afraid of being ridiculed. They don't want to be embarrassed. So you don't talk about it. I didn't talk about it. So I ended up going to Taos, New Mexico a few months later. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but I went there to paint, really just to paint. That was my goal. I rented a place for 2 months to go out there and paint. And at the end of the 2 months, my lease was up and I said, "I'm not coming back." I knew I wasn't coming back to Maryland. So I ended up staying out there and I stayed for a number of years. And this is where I unpacked my gifts. This is where I began to do psychic readings and workshops and teach and, of course, continue to learn myself. This is where I unpacked the energy. And the reason it happened out there was, I don't know if any of you have ever been to one of these very energetic centers like Taos. Taos is sort of in a vortex like a Sedona or a Mount Shasta. There's a number of them around the world. And they are highly energetic. And the people who live there and go there to visit are oftentimes have a very high vibration themselves. You get a lot of artists and writers and musicians and spiritual people. So in a place like Taos, if somebody says to you, "What do you do?" and you say, "I'm a psychic," they say, "Oh, yeah, me too." It's not a big deal. So in that kind of environment, you can just kind of relax about the fact that you've got this weird ability that, in other places people might, have all sorts of reactions to, but out there they don't. So that was where I relaxed about this and I started to work with the energy. And now eventually I came back to the East Coast and I came back to Maryland and I thought I was done with all this psychic work, mediumship and psychic work, because Baltimore is not like Taos, not by any stretch of the imagination, so I figured that was kind of the end of that, but that's not what happened. I was actually approached by a woman when I came back who was a near-death experiencer. And I will explain what a near-death experiencer is, but she was a near-death experiencer. She had dropped dead in her kitchen at 37 years old of a cardiac arrest while she was making breakfast for her 2 little kids. And she lives in Howard County. The Howard County EMTs came, took her to Howard County Hospital and revived her. She's in the medical literature because she was dead and then she was not dead anymore. So, and the doctors couldn't figure out what happened to her. But anyway, she asked me if I would do a reading for her, which I did. And then a number of other people asked if I would do readings, and I did. And, before I knew it, I was doing readings and teaching and, this sort of thing. So that's sort of how my practice on the East Coast started out. Now, in 2013, hold on one second. I was asked to do a reading for a famous near-death experiencer. Now, some of you may have heard about near-death experiences. Movies and TV have really popularized and glamorized the NDEs. That's the abbreviation for near-death experiences. They've popularized them and glamorized them because they are just so perfect for the wide screen, because you could show a tunnel and amazing light, and you could hear God's voice and you could see fantastic landscapes. There are all these things that can be created that just seem perfect for the movie theater or your home movie theater. The fact of the matter is not everybody who has an NDE has all those experiences, but it sounds good, right? So near-death experiences happen to millions and millions and millions of people all over the world, every year. But people don't talk about them. Now they're starting to talk about them more now because a few years ago, a now famous author, Eben Alexander, who used to be a Harvard neurosurgeon, wrote a book about his near-death experience. And that gave credibility to the idea of a near-death experience. I think people thought, well, if a Harvard neurosurgeon can talk about his near-death experience, first of all, he's credible. And second of all, well, I'm going to talk about mine too, because he went first. So so now there's lots of books on near-death experiences, TV shows, movies, and all of that. And near-death experiences can be anything from a veteran, a war, an army veteran, let's say, who got blown up by a grenade or had some sort of trauma, doesn't remember anything, didn't go through any tunnel, didn't see a light, didn't have a life review, didn't talk to God, didn't see dead, relatives, didn't see fantastic landscapes. They may not have experienced any of those, but they come back and they know that they're not the same person. And then there are people who have all the elements of a near-death experience, everything that I just mentioned and more. And they come back and they're not the same person anymore either. So the definition of a near-death experience is really an experience from which you return unable to go back to your previous life, because people can't agree on what a near-death experience is. Some people say, as a matter of fact, I do readings, and I read for a lot of near-death experiencers, and they say, I guess I didn't really have one because I didn't see a light, or I didn't go through the tunnel. And it's like, guess what? You don't have to see a light, So, but people feel inadequate because these things have been popularized. So anyway, I was asked to read for a famous near-death experiencer in 2013 to come to Washington, D.C. and read for this person. He was somebody who'd been struck by lightning, had a near-death experience, and came back and hears symphonies. And he also plays the piano. He could play these symphonies on the piano. Now, he couldn't do any of this before his experience. He's been written up in lots of places. He's a pretty well-known guy. He's been studied by a lot of people. And it's, nobody in the scientific profession really can understand what happened to him. So they asked me to do a reading for him, and I went to DC and I did this reading. And when I was doing the reading, I was getting a lot of really unusual symbols. Psychics get their information in symbols, and the symbols I was getting when I was reading for him were the cosmos, symbols from the universe. I mean, a lot of people come for a reading and they want to know about their boss, or they want to know about work, and believe me, I'm not shown the cosmos. Somebody's asking me about their boss or their job or their boyfriend or girlfriend. But, all of a sudden I'm seeing all these literally out of this world symbols. So it was an unusual reading for a lot of reasons. And I came back home that night to Baltimore. And I thought, what happened to this guy? Why does he have these special powers? And what about other NDEers? What do they get, if anything? And what are they supposed to do with it? Does everybody get something? What are they supposed to do with it? What does it mean? And why is this happening? So I went online and I Googled near-death experience after effects, and I found out there hadn't been any research done. So I said, well, I guess I'll have to do the research. Now, the thing is, I was on Wall Street for 25 years. The first 10 years, I was a healthcare research analyst. So this was the kind of thing that I did. So I kind of feel like this was a little bit preordained, because I don't think there's any other psychic medium out there who's also a healthcare research analyst, who was sort of teed up to do this. So I started to do work on near-death experience after effects. And the thing is that people come back from these experiences with all kinds of unusual after effects. Many of them come back psychic or mediumistic. They're connected to other worlds. Many come back with physiologic after effects, like, well, there's a whole range of after effects. They could have new mathematical abilities. They could have new musical abilities, like this person that I read for. They could have new artistic abilities. Some come back with enhanced hearing or vision. And this has been tested. I wrote a book. It's called Life After Near Death. And this book came out in 2016. And it's cases of people who had near-death experiences and came back with these unusual after effects for which there's no explanation. And I interviewed at that time about 50 people who had these NDE after effects. And of the 50, I chose about 15 for this book. And some of them have been on TV. some of them have, given talks and whatnot. You might see them online, on the internet or YouTube. When you go on TV and you say that you now have enhanced hearing or vision, and you go on the Discovery Channel, they make you go to a doctor to get tested, because they're not going to put anybody on the air who makes a claim that then turns out to be false. So, these people have been tested. They had, in many cases, they had the tests before their NDEs. They may have had a physical or a hearing test or a vision test before their NDEs, and then they get tested afterwards. So, this has all been proven. And, so there are cases. There's a case in the book, Life After Near Death, my book, of a man whose vision was 2090 before his NDE, and after his NDE, it was 2010. That's better than perfect vision. Now, with this particular guy, he was a riot policeman. He worked the riot team, and his job was to beat and gas people. He was not a nice guy, no. And he went to Arizona to visit his son. He spent a week visiting his son, and after the week, his son drove him to the Phoenix airport, and this man thanked his son for a lovely time, got out of the car. He said he didn't feel well, but he John Wayne'd it through the terminal, and then he got on the airplane and he dropped dead. Now, lucky for him, there were some EMTs on the airplane, and they brought him back to life. But while he was dead, he saw his wife having an affair with his best friend. This was like not the greatest, most enlightening. I mean, it was enlightening, but not in a real pleasant way, I guess. He saw the other cops, he saw people talking about him behind his back. He was not a nice person. And he had other things happen to him in his NDE, but, he had a couple things that really shook him up. And he came back, he lived. And when he returned from the NDE and he was recovered from his heart attack, he said, I only want to do good. He quit his job as a cop and he moved to Oregon, where he became like a community leader. He started like writing grants for unwed mothers and coaching the little league team. I mean, he had a complete reversal in his personality. He just wanted to do good. This is very typical. People come back, they are not the same. They are completely different people. They are often not recognized by their family, and they say they don't recognize themselves either. So something happens to change all these people. And this is not one story. This is every story. And I know when I read for NDEers, and they start off by telling me, I used to have this life, and now I have this other life. A lot of them don't know that they had NDEs or even spiritually transformative experiences. But, they'll just tell me a little background, and I'll ask them, did this occur? Did this happen to you? And they're, oh, yes, I was in an automobile accident, or I had a near drowning, or, something. You could trace it back. So these folks it's not one story, it's millions of stories, and it's consistent. So anyway, there are a variety of after effects. There's a woman in this book, Life After Near Death, who lived in Illinois, and she went to the one of the spiritual temples in Illinois, and she stood outside the temple and she said, God, if there's anything else out there, show it to me right now. I'm not going to take another step forward until you show me. Okay. And guess what happened? She ended up in the hospital. She was 36 years old. She ended up in the hospital with a heart attack and all sorts of other things. Her parents were called, and the doctor said, why didn't anybody know that this woman had all these conditions? And they said, well, because she didn't. There was nothing wrong with her. She was healthy. Anyway, she was 36 years old. She began to get quantum physics downloads after her NDE. She has 32 bins of paper in her bedroom closet filled with these quantum physics downloads. Now, she's a former hairdresser, so she really doesn't know what to do with these formulas, okay? So, that's another story. There are scientists, or several scientists in this book. One was a scientist in Mexico. He came down with dengue fever and I think meningitis, and he was airlifted to a CDC hospital in Atlanta. And when he was in the hospital, his wife said to the physicians, "What are his chances?" And they said, "We don't know, because we've never seen another case like this." So he lived, and he was fine, but he was not the same person anymore. He came back as a sort of a shamanic artist. And what happens with him is that he gets these downloads at night when he tries to go to sleep, he's like taken back to the time of the cavemen, or, shamans, prehistoric times. He's taken to other realms. And he told me that his headboard of his bed is worn away because he grips his headboard at night because he knows what's coming and he doesn't want to go. But it's his consciousness that goes. He doesn't want to go, and he's holding on to it. And there's his headboard is worn away where his wedding ring is because he's like gripping it so hard. So he came back as a shamanic artist, and he said to me, "I'm not the spiritual one. My wife is a spiritual one. I'm a scientist." Like, he doesn't, like, what is this about? Why is this happening to me? And he gets these downloads of shamanic art. And then he'll go down to his basement, and he'll work on 5 or 6 pieces at a time until it's like this compulsion until he finishes them. And then he'll stop, and then the cycle starts all over again. All of these after effects in fact present as compulsions. People can't stop. Whatever it is that they've got, they can't stop it, and they can't stop doing it. So, like the 32 bins of paper and the, these ongoing shamanic dreams and the impulse to create art. There's a fellow in the book actually a woman in the book, who is a musician, and she had no connection with music at all prior to her NDE. She had an NDE when she was 18 in an accident. And she went out the next day and sold everything, every one of her possessions, and bought all this electronic music equipment, even though she'd never played an instrument in her life. And she then spent the next 30 years composing music and making CDs. She's actually pretty well known, and making these CDs. And she has concerts. And after a concert, she goes right back to her studio and keeps working. This is a compulsion. So all of these stories they're all very similar, but the after effects are different. But what happens with the people is kind of similar. So there are artistic after effects, there's physiologic after effects, there's the mediumship and spiritual after effects. Many people return, they're very spiritual when they come back, including atheists. Many people quit their jobs because they find they don't like their jobs anymore. I mean, maybe it used to be fun doing this thing, but now they want something that's more meaningful. Many people become vegetarians. They can't eat the food that they used to eat. So there's a whole range of after effects. And, the question came up. I did readings for all these people. And I told them, you could all ask a question in the reading. And they said, that's fine. They all said, we only have one question. And I said, okay, what's that? And they said, what's my mission? They all used the word mission. None of these people knew each other, but they all had the same question and they used the same phrase. They all came back thinking that they had a mission now that they were back on Earth. And it wasn't like, what should I get a new job, or should I go back to school, or, it wasn't. They always used the word mission. And so it sort of became obvious that these people are returning to Earth to be sort of batteries of light to light the Earth. They're like light workers, because they all want to help other people, and they want to use this newfound power that they have, which is really energy, very high form of energy. They want to use it to help others. So many of them become Reiki masters, massage therapists, psychics, mediums. Some of them can't find an outlet. Music is a high vibration activity, so that sort of makes sense. But a lot of people can't find an outlet, and they just a lot of them end up quitting their jobs and just kind of wandering around the world trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with themselves. They've lost their friends. Most of them have lost a lot of their family, because when they tell their family what happened to them, their families say, you'll get over it. That didn't really happen. get over it. So, I mean, you can imagine what that's like. Here, your whole life has been turned upside down. You've got no support because people are just telling you you're crazy. So, so it's a real phenomena. And as I said, there are millions and millions and millions of people. It doesn't discriminate. It's men and women, young and old. This happens to children too. It happens to religious people, to atheists. It happens in every country in this world. So it's a widespread phenomena. And in my language, which may be different than your language, but in my language, they come back. What seems apparent is they return with, they're like top heavy with consciousness. That's the problem. Sounds like a really neat idea, right? Like, oh, I have so much consciousness, I could do all these wonderful things. It's not so neat, because it makes life very unwieldy. Because here's the thing, we live on Earth. We don't live on some other planet, where if you have too much consciousness, you're fine. We're not androids. So, here on Earth, everybody is sort of made up a certain way. And if you are, have too much consciousness in your, for instance, in the book, there's a guy who's standing in the Walmart, one of the near-death experiencers. He's standing in the Walmart, and there's a woman in line ahead of him. And all of a sudden, he gets the insight that her dead sister wants to communicate with her. And he also sees a peacock red wall in her house. So he taps her on the shoulder. This is someone he's never met before. He taps her on the shoulder and he says, "Excuse me, do you have a peacock red wall in your house?" And she turns to him and she says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Also, your sister so-and-so wants you to know that she loves you." And this woman ran out of the Walmart. She didn't know what was happening. So, but the guy he's getting messages and he has no boundaries. So, he's just blurting things out to people. But anyway, it appears as if these people are coming back tanked up from the universal consciousness filling station, if there is such a place. It's like they have their NDE, they go out into the universe someplace and they tap into all this consciousness, and then they return with more consciousness than they started out with. And that's why they have these unusual after effects, and they're able to be psychic and mediumistic and all of that, because their energy's changed, their energy's been altered. So it's happening more and more. And as a matter of fact, we're going through this epidemic right now, the coronavirus. And I don't know about you people, but I can tell you that I am hearing more and more stories of people having unusual dreams, of having their consciousness open, of having these experiences that they've never had before, where all of a sudden, they're just getting messages. There's something happening right now. And it's happening all over the world too. I mean, I got an email the other day from National Geographic, the National Geographic News, and it was, "What should we do about our children who are having these unusual dreams?" I mean, it's happening. So I think that there's some sort of, there's a massive shift going on. Now, trauma brings on spiritual shifts. It brings on spiritually transformative experiences. Trauma brings on near-death experiences. There's something that happens with trauma that changes people. And this is a different kind of trauma, but it's trauma, and it's worldwide, and it's collective, and it seems to be affecting everyone. So, we don't know the answer yet, but I don't think we're going to look the same individually or collectively when this is all over. And I don't think the world is going to look the same. So let me see. So in terms of creating an NDE, people ask me, how can I have one of those? That's exactly what I need. That's just what I need to fix myself. And I'm like, you don't understand. You don't really want one of these, it really turns your life upside down. But there seems to be a certain amount of intention involved. You can't just give yourself an NDE, but there are certain things in common that people who have NDEs have in common. One is often a background of abuse. We don't know why that background fits with people who have NDEs, but they have it. Yeah, there seems to be a certain predisposition for NDEs and spiritually transformative experiences too. A lot of times people, I meet a lot of people, I read for people who say, you know, from the time that they're young, they're really into science fiction, and they say, I wonder what's going on out there. I wish I could go out there and be part of it. I wish I could see it. Well, they keep doing that. And at some point, guess what usually happens? They go out there or they get a little visitor from out there, you know. So somehow these messages are being heard and acknowledged someplace in the universe. So I'm not smart enough to know where that is and how it all works, but it seems to work. So anyway, near-death experiences are becoming, you know, they're more and more talked about. There are groups around the world. There's a group called IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Experiencers. There's a chapter in Howard County. They're all over the world. And it's a place for people to go. It's like AA or something, or a 12-step program, because you can go there and there are other people like yourself that you can talk to. There's also, but generally only, I think 25 to 30% of the group has had NDEs. The rest of them are people who are just fascinated and they come to the meetings. So, and they usually have a speaker, you know, every month, you know, somebody who's had an NDE. There's lots of talks on YouTube by NDEers. There's lots of books out now by NDEers. So it's—
Hey, Deborah.
Yes.
This is Troy. Margaret and I thought we'd pop in. We've been getting a few questions and we thought maybe this would be a good time, if that's all right.
Absolutely, perfect.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Margaret, I think you have one or two, and then I've been trying to keep track myself, so.
Okay.
All right, I missed yours.
Okay, oh yeah, I didn't put mine in.
All right.
So do you want to go?
Colleen was asking, are these after effects related to their past life talents?
So I have to say, nobody has connected NDE after effects with past lives. And I am not a past life person. I don't read people for their past lives. So, you know, I'm no expert on that, but it doesn't appear to be linked to that. This seems to be, the after effects don't appear to be linked to anything except the fact that they've come back, you know, with this overload of consciousness. And then for each person, it's translated in different ways. You know, I've met a lot of people who say, there must be something wrong with me because I didn't come back with any musical after effects, or I'm not getting quantum physics downloads. Well, I have news for you. That's just, you know, a few people get things like that. Everybody comes back changed, unable to go back to their previous life because they just feel different. But not everybody comes back with these really, you know, weird after effects. That's, you know, there are some who do, but most of them just come back knowing that they're different, knowing that they can't go on with their life as it used to be.
We had Terry popped in and Rodenbaugh and said, it sounds almost like some of these people come back with a different soul or enhanced soul. Have you thought anything about that and how to respond to something like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. They seem to come back, you know, there's so many different words for soul. It's like there are many different words for God. You know, there's God, then there's the one and source and the all and spirit and the universe. I mean, you know, you can go on and on. There are different words for soul. They seem to come back with this universal consciousness. You know, that's what I would describe it. They all are the same in that they all have a piece of this universal consciousness that sort of overtakes them. And somewhere in there, they're still the same person, the same earthling, but this other uniform collective consciousness overwhelms them. And it's not a soul in terms of, you know, I have a unique soul, you have a unique soul. It's not that. They still have, you know, if you can dig behind the layers, you still find their earth soul, their soul that they came with. But they are now all they're almost like drones. You know, it's like an army of drones. You know, they've all been sent out to the universe and they're coming back. They're missionaries. They're missionaries for the light. They're missionaries for the universe. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. And, you know, there's no way that I can get like, I can't just send a question out to the universe and they'll say, yeah, you know, here's the answer. It just doesn't work like that. We don't know. And, you know, we don't have the tools, you know, to get all the answers yet. So this is sort of just scratching the surface based on, you know, the work I've done and a few other people. But I don't think, I mean, I think it's a really good question, but I don't think it's, I wouldn't describe it exactly as as a new soul. I think it's a new soul in the, you know, to the extent that they've now been superseded by the universe's soul.
Yeah, Rob just popped in and said it almost sounds like they developed a deeper connection to their spirit guide to lead them to a higher purpose in their lives.
Yeah. Well, they definitely, so that's another good question, because many of these people lived lives prior to their NDEs. Their lives were referenced by darkness. So what do I mean by that? Many of them had a history of abuse. Many of them were not nice people. They were like mean people, like the guy I told you about who used to beat and gas people. That was his job. These were not nice people. They were on the dark side. And it seemed to me as if they go along in their lives for a certain period of time. And then the universe kind of says, okay, they learned that lesson. Time to take them now and show them something else. And who's a better missionary for the light than somebody whose life has been encompassed by darkness? You're ready for something else, right? So I don't know who takes them there. I don't know if it's their spirit guide or, you know, here again, you're getting into semantics. You know, is it the one? Is it your spirit guide? Is it your, you know, something? Pulls them out of their body and takes them someplace else. And they do come back fueled with a mission. You know, now they have this higher mission. They want to do good. They're like super Boy Scouts. They want to do good. They want to help the world. They want to help other people. All of that bad stuff that they were filled with is dropped away. You know, it just makes me think that it's really driven by some force that's out there that's so much larger than any of us and anything that we can understand. I mean, it's because it affects millions and millions and millions of people. Now, how could this happen to all these people and they're all having the same kinds of results? I mean, it defies logical explanation, but I'm sure there's an explanation for it. It's just that I don't know exactly what it is. I can only speculate. But they do return infused with a mission. And, you know, maybe you could say it's their soul's purpose. I think it's the universe's purpose. I think the universe grabs them and says, see, when I was doing this work, I thought, what does the universe know that we don't know? Why are they taking all these people and bringing them back filled with light to do good things? What is wrong with the earth that they need to like repopulate the earth with all these people? Because that's what they're doing, you know? It's like they're sending all these batteries of light in, you know, like SOS, you need a lot of help. So I don't know the answer to that, but some force that we don't understand is creating this. You cannot.
It's almost like a shift. It's almost like a shift in the universal energy conscious. They'll say like when a lot of, I used to work with some Native American elders when I lived in Arizona and New Mexico. And they would say, you know, even in ceremonies and song and dance that they did, I asked him, I asked one of the elders, I'm like, do you really believe that when you shake a feather or make some music that it really does affect something far, far away or on the other side of the universe? And this elder looked at me and she goes, I'm surprised you would ask that. Scientifically, you should know that because you can vibrate something here and it will affect something there. And she goes, we are really connected and absolutely do believe that has an effect on the universal consciousness. So what you just said made me think of that as people come back, go away, and thousands of people come back into the mix of humanity, their energy is different. It's heightened, it's changed. And I would imagine it gives a little bit of a booster shot, you know, to the rest of our consciousness.
Well, that seems to be what they're doing. I mean, and they take one person, and this person has their NDE, and they come back, and now they have heightened consciousness. And it's like Amway. They then try to do this to all these other people. Their job is to do Reiki on you and you and you and you, or, you know, music. I mean, some of these people come back as musicians. Music is a high vibration activity. You know, you give a concert to 1,000 or 100,000 people, and it's sort of mystical music at a high vibration. It's going to impact them, you know. So they have, that's their job. They're missionaries. So missionaries for the light. And they have the high vibration. You know, somebody with a low vibration can go around and knock their head against the wall all day long, and it's not going to do anything. But somebody with a high vibration, you know, actually can get some of this done. So yeah. Where in New Mexico did you live?
I was in the Navajo reservation and near a place called Kinlachi near Ganado, Arizona, which is close to Window Rock, Arizona. So the capital of the Navajo Nation. I was there teaching for about 4 or 5 years. So while I was there, it gave me the opportunity to really connect. I was in Taos and Santa Fe and Sedona and had some really awesome experiences there too. So that, what a wonderful place to go. Especially, I love that part of your story of living there for so long, because that is just like a battery boost to your ability.
Well, they say, you know, if you ask the locals, how long have you been in Taos? They say, oh, I came for a weekend 20 years ago. Because it's notorious for these stories of people who, you know, were driving through and their car broke down and they're still there, you know, 20 years later, or, you know, something happened. Yeah. It's interesting. So they say if the mountain loves you, you stay.
Hey, Margaret, it looks like you have a couple more questions, huh?
I do. All right. So you got one. Jody and Lisa are asking, is the reverse possible? In other words, can decent folks prior to an NDE, but then come back as bad? If you're saying bad folks are coming back as good, can the reverse happen?
Wait, so can you read the question again? I missed some of that.
Is the reverse possible? As in, can a good person experience near death and come back bad?
Oh, huh. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, everyone that I've ever encountered has been the opposite. They've been people who've had issues with their life. I mean, look, everybody has issues, you know, nobody has the perfect life, but a lot of these people had backgrounds of abuse, really bad behavior. I haven't met anybody who told me that they were like, everything was just peachy keen in their life, and then they had, you know, a NDE and they came back and they became a bank robber or anything. I mean, I've just never met anybody like that. I don't think so. I mean, I just don't think that's what this is about. And, you know, it's possible there's some people out there, you know, I mean, this affects so many people that, you know, there's no good, it's very hard for scientists to do the work for this, because a lot of people don't talk about their NDEs. There are people who've had them that don't know that they had one, that that's what it is. They can't collect all the data. You know, they're trying to collect data on people who've had hellish NDEs. And it's hard because it's not like, you know, it's not like signing up to vote for an election. You know, they can't just go poll everybody. And so, you know, they have to work with the tools that they have. I think there are many more people who've had these than the data that the scientists use reflects. But I'm just trying to think of people that I've encountered or read for who were good people who something happened to them and they became bad. Because I read for a lot of people who not only had NDEs, but they've had spiritually transformative experiences, which could happen if you're undergoing some kind of trauma, like what we're going through today. It's not like an automobile accident or a drowning, but it's trauma, right? And it could be a divorce. It could be the death of someone close to you, particularly if you sat bedside with that person when they died. There's a shift in energy in the room. So, you know, that can affect you. And people don't know. I mean, they just go on with their lives and they know something's different, but they don't talk about it. And there's no place they can go to find out what, you know, what happened to them. But oftentimes when someone comes to me for a reading, you know, we can find out anything. Yeah, but what I was going to say is, you know, all the people I've talked to, thousands and thousands of people now, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who was good and came back bad after an experience. No.
That's fascinating. That's a really interesting question, I think. And I never even thought about that because I've never heard of it happening. So like you, that's really cool. Now I know that Rob Guttrow, who's also a medium, works with our group, had a really interesting question, I thought. Would you like me to go ahead and pose that one, Margaret, or do you see it there?
I do see it. He was coming up next. You just beat me to it.
Oh, okay. We'll go for
it. Do you consider people who are slowly dying that see and converse with their relatives in spirit and maybe even pass for a moment and return to have NDE?
Do I consider people, and then what was after that?
Who are slowly dying that see and converse with their relatives in spirit.
Okay. All right. So what a great question, because I just happen to have written another book. And I didn't even ask him to ask that question. This is called Diary of a Death Doula. This came out in October of 2019. So it's new. And it's about my work sitting bedside with the actively dying at hospice. Now, the thing is, I'm a medium as well as a death doula. Not all death doulas are mediums, but I happen to be a medium as well as a death doula. People at end of life travel. They are not responsive, but they're conscious. You know, so if you walk into the room of a dying family member, a patient in hospice or hospital, or even at home, you know, you might be taken aback because you see this body and it looks like nobody's home, right? But in fact, there's a lot going on. They are journeying, they are traveling in their consciousness, and they may see relatives who've passed, you know, who are on the other side. They may see, you know, it's similar to an NDE. They may see amazing landscapes. They may journey to their childhood home. There's a lot going on in their consciousness, not in their physical body. But that's a phenomena that is associated in terms of meeting your relatives. It's associated with end of life, and it also happens sometimes in NDEs. So NDEs, it was interesting, you know, when I started writing this book about being a death doula, I was like, wait a second. Some of these things that happen to people at end of life are very similar to NDEs, except the NDEs are sort of like the previews to the movie. So it's the highlights, because NDEs happen in minutes or seconds of Earth time, and they're meant to be teaching experiences. So it's sort of like you have to hit the experiencer really hard with a few big points that they're going to remember. So when they come back, it's going to like influence the rest of their lives. You know, if you have an NDE and you take them and they see a daisy and they come back, do you think that's going to change their life? Probably not. But if they have a life review with their dead grandmother, who was the most important person in their life, and they have, you know, they're shown various scenes from their past, you better believe that has an incredible impact on them. Because again, it's supposed to be a teaching experience. They're supposed to come back and use this. Actual physical terminal death is different because it's more prolonged. Unless it's from trauma, it's more prolonged, and it's about transition from the physical state to the conscious state. And it can go on for quite a while, but it shares some of the aspects of the NDE. They can see their relatives who've passed on. Now, the thing is, with people who are in hospice at end of life or hospital, they could be out of body and see their relatives, but they can also be lying in the room in hospice, and they see their spouse who passed, you know, a number of years before them, or they see their grandmother and their mother and their aunt and their uncle. And I think what that's about is, because I see them too, because I'm a medium, and I've seen them in every room at hospice that I've ever been in. I have seen relatives, loved ones from the afterlife in every room. And because I'm a medium and I talk to dead people, I asked one time, I was asking this was the mother of the patient. The mother was in spirit, and she and some other family members were in the room. And I said, why do you come in? And she said, this is our job. This is what we do. I mean, it sort of made me think of jury duty, because she said, when you pass, this is a job that you're given and you would never turn it down. It's like the civic responsibility. It says civic responsibility in the afterlife. This is this very important role that you play. And she said, we would never turn it down. And I said, well, how do you know when to come in? And she said, well, it's sort of like you have speed dial, like you have speed dial on your cell phone. And so you can instantly tap in. And she said, when people in the afterlife, they exist as energy. So they don't exist in a physical form. They can be everywhere and anywhere at the same time. So they can instantly come in, and it's like they get a buzz on their speed dial. It's time. And they appear collectively. They appear with the other family members, and they come in to provide support and comfort. And the person who's dying knows they're there, and they talk to them. And I'm sure you all have had experiences, and some of the people listening tonight have had experiences. And not only that, there are people, sometimes there's something called a shared death experience, where the person who's dying sees their mother, and guess what? So does everyone else in the room see, the people in the afterlife. That's called a shared death experience. They're having the same experience. So it's different than an NDE, because with the NDE, you might have a life review with a loved one who passed, but when at end of life, they come into our world to do a job. And not everybody who has an NDE has a life review. And, we asked that question in the readings because a lot of people felt really inadequate because they hadn't had life reviews, and they were really embarrassed. They're embarrassed. It's like, my NDE was no good because I didn't have a life review. And the thing is, you don't have to check off every box. But, we asked the question, why didn't you have a life review? Well, so what came up in the readings was, in order to have a life review, you have to have had a person in your life who was so meaningful to you that when they talked, you listened. They were somebody that meant so much to you that they just made such an impression on you in your life. They were like the key person. So some of these people didn't have those people. They had parents who were absent or didn't care or whatever. They didn't have any other extended family, or there just wasn't anybody there for them. They're the ones that didn't have the life reviews with somebody. But for somebody who had a life review with there are many people who their grandmother was the most important person in their life. That's who came in to give them the life review. And that left a real impression on them, because it's like, if my granny told me this, you better believe that I believe it, So, and then when your grandmother comes in the afterlife to tell you, it's even like, it's 100 times more, bigger event. So there's similarities, but differences. But it's a good question. Good question.
All right. Cheryl wants to know if you can raid someone without them being near you or in front of you.
Oh, yeah. That's the 99% of what I do. Yeah. So I have people, I read for people all over the world. Most of them I've never met. Most of them I've never met. And I probably will never meet them. I feel like I know them, but we read on Zoom and Skype and FaceTime, and it's just like this. I mean, we can talk on this, and we all get each other, and I could do a reading on one of you. It doesn't matter, because energy is non-local. So you don't have to sit in front of me. This is not about your physical body. This is about your consciousness, and so. I definitely do not need you in front of me. It's funny because I had a talk with someone today who runs some spiritual expos. And I asked her how things were going. And she said, well, all the readers were saying that all the people who didn't want to have readings over Skype and Zoom, insisted they had to have their readings in person, are now coming and doing them on Skype and Zoom because they don't have any choice. And then they're finding out, oh, they're exactly the same. Yeah. So it's, yeah, I read mostly, I would say 99%. Now, there are some people who insist they have to be in person because they feel like, I don't think they understand how it works. So they feel like you have to sit there and I have to sit there. But it's consciousness. It has nothing to do with your physical body, where you are physically.
Like an interesting question, and this may not have happened, but it would be interesting. The whole science side of me pops in. Have you ever read someone before they had an NDE, then they had the NDE, and then you read them afterwards?
No, no, because so here's the thing. It takes about 7 years for the effects of an NDE to kind of gel. You know, these people are sort of in transition. Well, I mean, they could come back and immediately be, you know, have some things, but most of them don't even know what happened to them. It takes some years to even know. Oh, they don't know what a near-death experience is. They've never heard of an NDE. You know, all they know is that they were in the hospital and they died and they were on an operating table and they looked down on their body and they heard, you know, they saw the doctors, but they don't know what that was. And people aren't coming up to them the next day. It's not like the Jehovah's Witnesses are coming in the room and handing out cards saying you had an NDE. You know, so how would they know, right? They don't know.
Right.
So I mean, maybe I've read for people before they've had NDEs, and maybe they've had NDEs since then. But I mean, I wouldn't know. It's hard. It would be hard to track that.
It's funny. I just ask only because I'm wondering if because people come back with a mission, and a lot of people, and they have some of the same stories, and they come back with some of them with heightened senses of people around them and people that weren't with them or they knew were there before, and now they're there. It would just be an interesting experience to have, to be able to really see the difference that changed someone.
I read for people who've had NDEs, and I see them in the readings before the NDEs. So it's kind of like there is no past, present, and future in time, you know, and it's all happening at the same time. So it's the same thing in a reading. When I'm reading for someone, I'm in their consciousness, and consciousness has no past, present, or future. So I could look out and see, you know, 20 years from now, I could look back 20 years and I could tell them what they had for lunch that day, you know, so it's all happening at the same time. So I could tell them. I mean, when I read for all the NDEers, I went with them on their NDEs. I experienced what they experienced. So, you know, that's just something.
That completely makes sense. We've had people when we've gone on some of our investigations, and Rob and I have had these experiences, especially where we've met a ghost or spirit that they can present in any time frame of their life. Like you can see them as a child or as a grandmother, whatever it is that they need to do. So I love that whole idea that there really is no time limit, because that is what that feels like. I love that answer. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. But it's interesting you say that about when you are doing your work and you see these spirits at different phases, because, you know, I've done readings for people. There was a guy I read for once, and I said, I've got your great aunt here. The guy was 65 years old. And he said, my great aunt, I haven't thought about her since I was 15 years old. And I said, yeah, she's from Maine, and she knew Ed Muskie. Do you remember Ed Muskie, who he was a senator from Maine, he ran for president? She knew Ed Muskie. And he's like, yeah, that's my aunt. What's she doing here? So, you know, I checked it. Long story, but I said, well, I'll tell you the story. I said, your aunt is here and she has brown hair and a bob. And he said, no. My aunt always had short gray hair. And I said, okay. He said, well, what's she doing here? I said, I don't know. Let's find out. So we asked her, and she said, I was a nurse and my husband was a doctor, and I had 3 sons who were doctors. And my nephew is not taking care of himself. He needs to take care of his health. So she was the one to come in. She was the message, you know, she was bringing in the message because she was a logical person. She had something to do with healthcare when she was here, and she loved him. So, you know, I passed on the message. And about 3 or 4 months later, he emailed me and he said, I've seen a doctor, and it was good I saw a doctor because blah, blah, blah. And then he said, and I was going through my parents' wedding album, and there was my great aunt 30 years ago with brown hair and a bob. You know, well, she can come in. So she came into the reading with brown hair and a bob, because, like, wouldn't you rather come in looking 30 years old and youthful than looking, you know? So that's what they do. They could, you know, a lot of times I'll describe to people, I've got so-and-so here, and this is what they look like. And they're like, I don't understand. Well, if you pass away when you're 85 years old, you know, you have a range of 85 years of how you can, you know, decide you want to appear. And yeah, so it's just, you know, I guess when you see them, same thing.
Same thing. It's like they can come back and people talk about seeing butterflies and birds, and I mean, they come back in all kinds of forms. It can be a feeling you get in the wind, and it can be a relative that just passed by. So
Yeah.
it's phenomenal the ways. I think in my experience, like you, they present themselves in the way that's most meaningful to what they're trying to say, whatever that message is. And that, like you said, it's their job. they're assigned to do it in the most effective way that they can. Of course, they're going to choose that path. And
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like we should tell people that before we, go in and give investigations. They may come and present in any different way. You just need to be aware of that. So think about their whole range of life instead of just what you have fixed in your mind right now.
Well, this whole area of altered consciousness and life beyond this world, I mean, it's not incorporated into the linear world like lots of other things. There's all these fringy people like us. It's becoming more part of a little bit more of the mainstream, but nothing like the real mainstream.
I saw a few more spikes on questions. Margaret, do you see any others before we turn it back over?
Well, Sharon had a comment. Why don't you take that one, Troy? Because I'm not sure
Okay.
that I'm understanding it all the way.
Okay, I'll just read it now. So Sharon, she said, before you have an NDE, I don't believe you even know about a heightened spirituality or even know that you should be reaching out to someone who could explain it to you. It's after the NDE that you have that need and that desire to go. Is that your experience of?
Yeah. As I said, most of these people, that is not what they're concerned about. There's a fellow in this book, Life After Near Death, and let me think about this. He was either, hold on, I'm just going to check because I want to make sure I get this right. He says, I was the lightest skinned child in a Hispanic household, which according to Hispanic tradition made me the favorite. I was also a tyrant. When I wanted to eat, the whole family ate. When I wanted to go on vacation, we all went on vacation. I was also my grandmother's favorite. So he was not a nice person. And he was like a dictator. He was like a little dictator. And he told a story about how he was going to Las Vegas for the weekend, and one of his cousins called and said that she needed money, and would he be able to loan her some money? And he said, I'm on my way to Las Vegas, like get lost. So he went to Las Vegas. He lost the exact amount of money that she had asked him for, and he came back. None of this stuff like affected him, but one night when he was at home, he went to sleep, and while he was sleeping, he had a hellish NDE. He had a bad NDE, and he went to a very dark place, and there were entities there. It was very dark, and he was scared. And he also saw his grandmother in this NDE, and he woke up the next morning. He couldn't get out of bed. He couldn't go to work. All he did was cry all day. He was really shook up. That night, his cousin called him and said, I have some bad news for you. And he said, I already know what it is. Grandma died last night. And she said, how do you know that? And he said, because she said goodbye to me. I guess, that was part of what happened. So, yeah, so he had a bad NDE, but it changed him. At first, it took him a couple of years. The first couple of years, he was trying to kill himself because he just couldn't handle any of this. And he would go on a drive, like on the Pacific Coast Highway, in California, 120 miles an hour with no headlights on at night. And the cops would pull him over and they would say, you need to be more careful. He wouldn't even get a ticket. This guy couldn't kill himself. Like they wouldn't let him kill himself. So eventually he worked through it and he became a very nice guy. He takes his parents shopping twice a week to Costco. He throws birthday parties for his nieces and nephews. His brothers say, who are you? We don't even recognize you. And he's like, I don't recognize myself. So, these are people who they certainly don't have the insight, and they're not even in that space before the NDE to ask themselves these kinds of questions. They are total ego, and bad ego at that. So, you know, they're not thinking of anything of a higher mind. They're just thinking about me, and that's kind of it, I guess.
You know, it's almost like, in what you just described, that the bad NDE, it's almost like his grandmother who passed, you know, around that same time, and he knew that was going on and had this dark experience. It's almost like she gifted him by showing him the state of his soul, like the darkness of who he was, so that it would have this huge impact that you need to snap out of it. Like, this is a really bad place for you to be, especially in your spiritual energy level and all of it. So when he came back, that stuck with him. It just affected him and changed his whole life to where he's like, I can't be that person.
Yeah.
That's just fascinating to me. I love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you said that, I started to get goosebumps. But really beautiful. And I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're right. I think you're right. It's just really.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's really something. Well, he was her favorite. And I guess she wanted, you know, on her way out to do something to leave an impression on him so the rest of his life could be better.
No, I'm covered in chills. So I think we connected to something there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Unless Margaret has more questions, we can let you, if you have some more to talk about with us, that'd be awesome. I mean, people are really fascinated with what you have.
And I want to thank you and thank everybody who joined us tonight. And I do do readings, and my website is DebraDiamondAuthor.com, so you can connect with me through that. I also have a YouTube channel, and I do a lot of teaching. So a lot of the teaching is on the YouTube channel. Every week there's another lesson. I think I'm going to do, the next one is going to be on psychic predictions for 2020.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
So go subscribe to the YouTube channel. You know, you'll get, so, because that there, you know, people have a lot of questions, and I give a lot of talks, but it's nice to be able to have YouTube where you can just kind of teach about, you know, one thing after another. So yes, sign up, subscribe to that. Yeah, you know, and the books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I would say they're in the bookstores, but nobody's like, I don't even think the bookstores are open now, right? So.
Yeah. Well, we had on closing, there was Terry popped in and just said, you know, we were talking about the dark NDE. She said, but not all people who have NDEs are bad though, right? And like, no, good people have NDEs too. So. I
guess, I mean, I you know.
How would you know?
Yeah, right. How would I know? I haven't talked to everybody.
Yeah.
They're just people. There's all, you know, so.
Well, I can't wait to read your book, and this has been really fascinating, and you can feel, you know, being you know, connected and gifted in certain ways myself. It's awesome to be able to see and feel and connect to the energy of somebody who really just is zeroed in on what they know and what they do, and you can see right through it and see the real heart of someone. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. This show, what I love about it is we'll have anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 people that'll pop in and out and watch it at a time. And then within a day, everybody has come in with their friends and watch parties, and you end up 300-400 people who've popped in or more. So nice. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, and thank you so much for, you know, having me on as a guest and letting me you know, meet you this way, and, you know, all the other folks who joined us tonight. So it's been my absolute pleasure. So take care, everybody. Stay safe and well.
When COVID's over, we'll all have a big group hug.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. And everybody is saying thank you.
Thank you to all of them. So.
All right.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Everybody have a safe evening.
You too.
See you, Debra.
Take care.